Hey team, Oscar here, and this is another highlight episode here on our Run Special podcast brought to you by the Frontrunner Colombo. This episode has been a favourite of mine. Caden Shields is a great mate, a great athlete, and a great person. I hope you enjoy his stories as he weaves his way through growing up down in Dunedin, heading over to the US on a scholarship, the pressures that came with that, leading into some of the things that he has learned and developed as an athlete and a person now with a young family, balancing his own business and continuing to run at an elite level. Kaden is an absolute wealth of knowledge, a genuine storyteller, and is an encyclopedia of all the races and events that he has done. Enjoy this episode. Tom and I really did enjoy chatting to Kaden, and we'll catch you guys sometime soon. Okay, Tommy, big episode for us, another highlight episode where we look to bring people in from our community, put the spotlight on them for amazing achievements, things they do in and around. So who we got, Turbo?
Well, we are lucky enough to be joined by the Caden Shields, probably one of the most well-known runners, I would say, in Christchurch, but not just a runner, an athlete, a husband, a father, and a seriously good physio. He's kept me out of a lot of injuries and holes in my career, so it's quite exciting to have him on the podcast. He is also boasts PBs of over the marathon of 2:11:35.
Rapid.
Breaking his half marathon PB en route, 65:20. 10Ks in 29:39 and a 5K PB of 14:18.
Don't forget to mention my amazing 800 metre PB.
Sub
2:08.
Yeah. Was that from 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I think that's from
That was
camps in
yeah.
2007 or
You had a
something.
good few cracks at Napunua a few years back, didn't you?
We ran a white hat after that, I'm pretty sure.
So that holds up back when Man United last won the Champions League.
I'm actually determined not to rack it now.
just live with it. What you want to do is have the marathon PB
At 2:08.
at 2:08.
Yeah,
So you can
yeah.
close out at 2:08.
Yeah, that would be class.
I'd just like to point out too that Caden's given up his Saturday afternoon to come
Yeah.
here and talk to me and Tommy, so we appreciate that, mate. Mate, really happy to have you here.
Yeah, thanks very much for him.
Is there anything you want to add to that intro before we crack in?
Well, I think we should add that his marathon PB is now top 10 all time?
13.
Or 13th, but I would argue top 10 all time. Some of the times in front maybe a little, but let's go past that one. No, I think that's a pretty good introduction of some of his accolades in the sport. But Kaden, how did we start this running journey?
Yeah, I've been running for a long time.
Yes.
Probably longer than a lot of people I compete against nowadays. But my origins in running was sort of actually largely driven by rugby, believe it or not.
How most New Zealanders get into the sport.
Yeah.
I was water boy duties?
My father worked for Lion Breweries growing up, and so I was around a lot of the Otago rugby players at the time because quite a lot of them worked for Lion Breweries before the game became professional, and so they were hugely influential in my life, as role models, and they were stars back then. Jeff Wilson, Josh Cromfeld.
Yeah.
They were huge. And so my dad would take me along to games, and so, I was really infatuated with rugby. And I remember saying to Mum one day, like, how can I get better at rugby? And Mum was like, well, you need to run up and down the hill every day. We live next door to a hill, so that's what I did.
That's awesome.
And then, so it's sort of one aspect of it. And then I was actually, surprisingly naturally talented at running, but I got third in the Greater. I grew up in Abbotsford in Dunedin, and I got third in the Greater Green Island cross country. I can't remember. I think it was my second to last year in primary school without training. And again, Mum was like, "Well, if you train, you can win it."
Yeah.
So I started running every day to Abbotsford School and back. I didn't actually go to Abbotsford School, but it was probably about a 3 kilometre run there and back. So I started doing that every day, and after doing that for a long period of time, just felt weird not doing it.
Yeah.
And I ended up winning the following year. And then the year after that, I went to Balmacewen Intermediate, and I was really lucky to have a teacher called John Lynyard, who was my first teacher there, and he was actually a age group triathlete, and he used to take me running after school 2 days a week, as well as some other kids. And you think back about it now, and you're like, wow, what a significant amount of dedication that man had, and gave up heaps of time. And he kind of nurtured that, and I was still playing rugby at the time, actually. Captain to the Otago under 38 kg rugby team.
Yes. What's that scrum weight? Is it 190 on the
I
scrum
don't even know
weight?
if we were allowed to push in the scrum.
Golden oldies.
Yeah. But anyway, once I went to King's High School and realised the depth of national secondary school running, rugby was quickly put to the side, and that's when I sort of met my high school coach, Richard Barker, who has had a massive influence on my life. So that's sort of the origins of running.
So you kind of touched on it there a little bit. I mean, the next question I had was it like, did you see success pretty quickly and easily right off the gate, which it sounds like possibly you did.
Yeah.
Do you think that's come from a natural aspect, or was it more just you getting out there and doing it and just sticking at it?
I'd say definitely a combination of both. I think because I was naturally good at running, I enjoyed it. It wasn't terribly hard for me to do.
Yeah.
And then seeing some pretty instant success from putting hard work in kind of reinforced that pattern for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my parents always encouraged me, and it's something I try and do as a parent as well. They encouraged me for my effort.
Yeah.
It wasn't about winning. It was about how hard I tried. So, my parents were really good at encouraging that from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good wee statement there for anyone else trying to get into the sport of running. It is all pretty much effort based. The amount you put in is what you get out.
Yeah, you've only got so much control. Over winning or losing. It's more about how you go about
So I guess the logical step was you went to high school. Did you see much success in high school, and how did that translate in your journey across the pond to America?
Yeah, high school was a lot tougher. I actually had a lot of injuries as a teenager. I think I had a lot of patellofemoral pain. So, I've had patellofemoral pain since the marathon, actually, 3 weeks ago. So it's been a common injury for me.
Yeah.
My whole career, I've probably had it over 10 times now.
Yeah.
On either knee. And so I had that about once a year as a teenager. Probably, running was so important to me. I sort of used to struggle when I couldn't run, and would get quite protective over my injury.
Yeah, I'm the same.
Yeah, that sort of influences me a lot now as a physio. I try and do my best. It depends on the problem that the individual is dealing with, but if I can, I try and keep the individual going.
Yeah.
So I did had quite a lot of injuries as a teenager at times, but also there was just a lot of really good guys when I was running. I mean, the depth in high school running in New Zealand right now is pretty amazing, of course.
Yeah.
But I didn't win this King's High School cross country until I was year 12.
Oh, really? Damn. So you guys had
we had some really good
pretty
runners.
sour efforts.
Yeah. I finished 7th in the New Zealand secondary schools cross country in year 9, and then was it? No, it wasn't 7th. Oh, I can't remember. Might have been 17th.
Yeah. Top 20 is still pretty
I don't
good.
think anyone's fact checking me.
Don't worry. I'm not looking at it now.
We'll just say top 20 and leave it at that.
Yeah, I think it was top 20.
Top 20.
I can't really remember, but and I always had a good people to drive me. When I first got to high school, it was Lyndon Brown.
Yeah.
He was an amazing athlete, and he's still a very close friend of mine. And we had a real strong rivalry, and that motivated me to train. And then then the next guy was Ben Nicholson. He just came out of the blue and was amazing. I remember lining up for the year 10. It was just the King's High School champs, and I thought I had the 3K wrapped up. And then he came. Oh no, it wasn't at the school champs. I won the school champs, but then we went to Otago champs, and he got closer, and I was like, oh, he's getting better.
Yeah.
And then we got to the South Island champs in Nelson, and I led it the whole way. I trained really hard all summer to try and win this 3K at South Islands, because the year before I got absolutely smoked at Kiwi 2. I think I finished. I was well back. There was this guy from Rangiora who won it, and he was flying.
Yeah.
I hadn't broken 10 minutes at the time, so I got absolutely smoked. But yeah, the following year, I sort of trained a lot harder and came back and I led the whole way, and then with 200 meters to go, this Ben Nicholson just smoked me. It was like watching Peter Snell finish the Tokyo 1500 meters.
Just
like,
out of the gate.
It was just, he smoked me. So I had I never really won anything until about year 12, and then also in year 12, is sort of when I started. Yeah, I suppose moving up the national ranks, I finished second in the road race at secondary schools, actually behind Hugo Beamish.
Oh, very nice.
Yeah.
You'll take that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I led that pretty much from the gun, and Hugo just rolled me in the last few hundred meters. But obviously, incredible athlete.
Yeah.
And so by year 13, I sort of had sort of moved up a bit more into the top runners in the country. But then again, I got the same injury in year 13, so missed the secondary schools.
Yeah.
But generally, I did run quite a bit in high school, and from a young age, I was running quite high mileage out of just pure enjoyment. Really, like I used to just love running around the hills of Dunedin. We never really did any speed work. Like Richard never really had us down at the track.
Yeah.
We would do stride outs, and we'd do drills, and we'd do hill reps and that type of thing. Fundamentals, we'd do stair reps, but we just had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, like, I was driven and I was motivated, but the training was just so much fun.
Yeah.
And I really, really hated it when I couldn't run.
Yeah. I think we're all a bit like that.
No OCD complex.
Yeah. Well, running was just my life as an adolescent, and it was everything that I wanted to do, and I wanted to be better at it. And I had a great person guiding me, and Richard, and who always kept me looking forward. He was always like, you need to be thinking about how you're going to be as a senior. It's not about winning junior titles. It's not about, it's good to do well, but we're preparing you for 10, 15 years from now.
Yeah.
I think Callum Moody and I are both 13th and 14th on the all-time list now in the marathon, and a big reason for that is Richard, I think.
Yeah. That's awesome. Did he know anything about going to the States, or was he pretty oblivious to it all?
Richard's works at the university at the time. He was an associate professor in statistics at the University of Otago. So Purdue actually contacted because I wasn't intending on going, and we had sort of made the decision that I was going to stay in New Zealand. And Leighton Tremaine had actually given me an awesome New Balance deal at the time, on the basis that I was staying.
Yeah,
and so I was getting really well looked after. And then Purdue approached Athletics Otago after I ran 14:39.
Yeah.
At the Christmas Cracker, which was an awesome race that Craig Molly used to organise. At Kiwi2, and it was just off the Otago record at the time. That was Glenn Martin's record. He had 14:35.
Yeah.
Purdue contacted Athletics Otago not long after that. And Richard sort of fired the email through to me and was like, "Oh, you've got to seriously consider this. This is a really good university." And so it was more the academic side of Purdue that drew me there. I mean, obviously it was in the Big Ten, and Nick Willis had just been through the Big Ten, and so that was also a big draw card, but it largely was because of the academics, which is like you can't really pass this opportunity out. So they came out to Auckland and met us, and we were pretty like upfront with them about what we wanted training wise and stuff. Yeah. And the plan initially was to have Richard still involved a bit. But as you know, with college running, it's not quite that straightforward. So Richard was really supportive of that. From the get go.
That's awesome. And you did your full time at Purdue over there, and then came back and did physio at Otago?
Yeah, so I did 3 years at Purdue because I had done a year and a half at Otago by the time I went to Purdue. Yeah. And I transferred my credits, and they just happened to transfer into pre-physical therapy. Yeah. They were kind of like, "Oh, we'll just transfer you into whatever you can get into, and then we'll worry about it after." Yeah. But it just happened that all my credits transferred into that. So it's kind of a coincidence, really, because I hadn't at that point decided like I didn't actually want to be a physio. So I thought I was going to be a scientist, like going down PhD pathway and stuff, and then. It wasn't until I had my first stress fracture. I sort of had an epiphany sitting at my desk one day in Indiana, and I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm being a physio would be cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I've sat here and interviewed a lot of people. That's not uncommon. Like to sort of have this light bulb moment. Of, you know, I remember talking to someone saying you have 4 careers. Like, you know, you think you might have 4 things you want to do, and then you kind of land on the third or fourth one. We've talked about your university experience in the past as friends.
Yeah.
If you're happy and comfortable, sort of share bits of it. I know they probably don't want to share all of it, but maybe talk us through, I guess, obviously some of the low points and some of the high points that you kind of had the experience over there. Because I think it's important for the young kids listening, because we do have a few.
Yeah.
And obviously you've been fairly open to talk to those young kids who might be going.
Yeah.
What do you think that experience was like?
My viewpoint, you know, it's funny as you mature in age and like life happens. you sort of your viewpoint on the past changes.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember thinking when I was sitting in the hotel room in Doha, you know, a couple of hours. I might have even been the night before the race. I'll probably get a bit emotional talking about this, sorry. But seeing my New Zealand singlet on the bed. And I was like, if I had not gone to the States, I don't think I would have been there. And it was just like I had to fail to get to Doha. And I made the NCAA championships in 2009 as an individual. And that was the big goal I had. Going to the States, like getting there, I was like, I remember I rocked up to my, doing a bit of a weave here.
You go for it, mate. You go for it. This is all you.
I rocked up. My first race in Indiana was the pre-nationals, and I'd come off again a bit of a knee injury. I'd actually gone to the States not really running for a couple of months. I'd run the 10K here at Christchurch and then got another niggle and couldn't run. So I rocked up to Peru. Actually hadn't not done a lot of running. So I sort of got back into it. Got a few sessions under my belt, and they're like, right, let's get you down to a race. So of course it was pre-nationals. And I ran the open race. So they had the white and the blue race, which is the top collegiate guys, and then the open race, which was for like your walk-ons and stuff. Yeah. And I got 50th. I got smoked. And I remember getting beaten by this guy with bare feet. He wasn't even wearing spikes. I was like, oh, mate.
What's happened?
And Sam Shalanga won one of the races, the first or second race, I can't remember. And he'd split 14:10 through the 5K. And he was just flying. And I was just like, this is incredible. Like, my eyes were just like, boom.
Yeah.
So it was a bit overwhelming, but also like I was like, wow, okay, I've got some work to do. So I got stuck in and I had, you know, not a bad first year. I sort of had an okay cross country season. Actually, I did all right. I finished 30th at the we had the regionals that year actually at our home cross country course at Peru, and it was snowing. And actually, Richard had come over for the race, which was awesome. And I sort of got out reasonably hard. It was 10K, and back then, like the difference between 8 and 10 for me was quite a lot. Yeah, in the sense that I was a lot better at 10. And I was sort of going all right for the first 3K, and we had actually a really steep hill on our course, and I remember getting to the top of that, and I was running beside Kieran O'Leary at the time. He was still at Michigan then. And I was like, oh, I'm struggling a bit here. But it was freezing as well. It was like well below zero. It's so cold. But so I finished 30th, I think, that day, 30-something, and that wasn't a bad run. And then I had a little bit of an average indoor season. I got a bit malnourished, sort of eating processed American food. I got a bit iron deficient over the winter. And then I managed to get it together for outdoors and ran my first sub 30 at Penn Relays, which was pretty cool. I felt quite confident going in that I was going to be able to do it. And that was pretty awesome. But they just rolled me, and like we had Big Ten champs 3 weeks later, and I was just still recovering from this 10K because Penn track's so hard.
Yeah, and it's a weird shape.
Yeah, and you're still young, I was 20. Yeah. So I didn't run that well at the Big Ten champs. So that's sort of when the pressure came on a bit, because I'd run quite well at Penn, and then didn't perform well at Big Tens. And to be honest, like that was just me also not dealing with pressure that well. Yeah. Big Tens is massive, and there's a huge amount of pressure, and so that sort of I kind of did crumble a little bit under that. Yeah. And so I decided to stay in Indiana for the summer, just to try and really focus on the running and get a bit better. And and so I did that, and that was a bit of a tough time. Like I sort of, I had a full scholarship, but the first summer school. Well, they have Maymester and then they have summer school. So you do like a month and then summer school. So Maymester was fine, but when I went into summer school, the university paid all my money to my accommodation, and then I had no money for food. And I was like, oh no, it was quite a stressful period for a while. I managed to get some. Well, my parents sent me some money, and then I managed to finally pay me some money for food. But there's just things like that you don't sort of you're not quite aware of when you first get a full scholarship, and then the tax bill at the end of the year as well. But,
it's not nice.
But anyway, I trained pretty hard that summer, and then I went up to Colorado it wasn't for long, but for a week, and trained with a friend who was joining our team, Charles. Yeah. And that was pretty cool. And then came back to Indiana and got stuck into the season pretty hard, and unfortunately I picked up a virus like pretty early on in the season, and back then, I was sort of, my attitude towards it was just sort of keep pushing, and then
We've all been there.
just 21, and then also my coach, they wanted me to be performing, so I just trained through it, and it got worse and worse and worse, and one day one of the guys on the team, like I was just like so unwell, it was really bad. I was coughing my lungs out all day every day, and and eventually one of the dudes on the team, he was actually a postgrad student who used to run with us on a Sunday, and he was like, mate, you need to go to the doctor. So I went to the doctor and got some antibiotics, and that cleared it up. But that was dumb, And, looking back on that, I'm like, I should have really not done that. But anyway.
Been there for sure.
I didn't run so well again at the Big Ten Championships, and was in the doldrums a little bit. And then... we had the regional champs that year at Indiana, and it was quite a hilly course. And to be honest, on the start line, I was like, man, I just want this race to be over. I just want to get on the plane home. Like it had been 18 months since I'd been home, and I was going home for Christmas, and like I just couldn't wait. And I was pretty homesick at that point. And I just remember thinking, like standing on the start line, I was like, I just need to get this race done. But it ended up being one of the best races of my career. Like, I got out and. Regionals, Great Lakes regions, stacked. Like we had some amazing runners in the area at that point in time, and it was my Ed's freshman year, and it was
pretty substantial names.
And I got out, and I initially lost contact with the front group, and then at about 3K, our assistant coach was like, "Come on, Kaden, show them what Kiwis can do," and it kind of just fired me up and. Brought me back to life, and I managed to get back onto the front group, and as we were going through the hills, and then at like 8K, I was like, "Still going all right here."
Yeah, I'm still here.
And I actually took the lead. Yeah, and it went sort of around a corner and up this back section towards 9K, and then the adrenaline wore off, and then I managed to just keep it together. And I remember Mo Ahmed just running away from me, and then with about it was quite a long straight, and with about 200 metres to go, I must have started the straight in about 5th place, and then I got passed by like 5 guys in the last straight, but ended up 5th. Got passed by a guy from Butler right on the line, and finished 10th, and that was enough to get a wildcard entry to NCAA cross. Yeah. So all of a sudden, at that point in time, I didn't know I wasn't an auto entry, so I had to wait the weekend, 24 hours to find out. And I was just sitting in the Union. We used to go for dinner in the Purdue Union every Sunday because the dining halls weren't open. Yeah. I was just sitting there with my girlfriend at the time, and got a call from my coach, and he's like, "You're in." And I was like, "Oh, man."
Yeah, that's it.
But again, like that week, I just didn't cope that well. We got down to it was in Terre Haute, so it was quite late booking accommodation and stuff, and we got down there and like staying in this grotty hotel, stank like smoke. And I was just
Put a plastic bag on the pillow.
Yeah,
they find some pretty rough ones, especially down there. And
I think it was like a Holiday Inn or something, but it was like a smoker's room. But I was just so anxious the whole weekend. Like I was just like struggling to eat, like struggling to sleep. I just did not cope with it. And the Sunday, I think the race was the Monday morning back then. Yeah, and I got out of bed, and we used to do, a shakeout the morning of the race, and rolling out of bed and like eating a muesli bar and just like barely able to get it down. and then got out jogging, and there was a Starbucks like right outside the hotel. And as I ran past the Starbucks, I was so anxious I like vomited this music bar back up just as my coach was walking out of the Starbucks. He's like, what?
What is going on?
So I managed to get my way through that warm up, but yeah, like I was just completely overwhelmed by the whole situation, and
Yeah.
standing on the start line. I'd never been in anything like that before. It's thousands of spectators, like massive 300 runners, all good runners. Like no one in that field's a bad runner.
No.
And I was on my own as well, like being an individual, so my team wasn't there. And I think you sort of lean on that team aspect of cross country in the US, and your brothers on the start line with you. And I didn't have that. And Oregon was right next to me, and I'm just this kid from Dunedin.
Big moment.
I got a question around that, because that was at a time when sport was beginning to become professional.
Yeah.
In a way, like, that sort of like 05 to 2010 kind of period. Like, I guess rugby had probably started in the early 2000s.
90s.
Yeah, like late 90s. But we didn't have things called like mental skills coaches.
No.
Or sports psychologists, or probably even really nutritionists. Like we had an idea of what we should be doing. And like, I think the Premier League was beginning, like with Sir Alex Ferguson, some of those guys were beginning to bring in the idea of those things being important. Like, can we get your mind right? Can we get your food right? Can we get your conditioning right? Do you feel like, and I'm going to do a zigzag here, do you feel like if you had some of those things back then, the experience might have been different?
Yeah, like, I think one thing that frustrates me a little bit in running is when people are like, you need to be relaxed. I'm like, well, you are not relaxed in a situation like that. Like you're on. Yeah. So like when I used to struggle with that concept, because I'd never be relaxed before a big race. And I'm a reasonably I've been a reasonably anxious person during my life, but like no big race was ever calm.
No. Yeah.
So I think kind of this expectation that, back then I thought I had to be calm.
Yeah.
And I wasn't. Rather than and then because I'm a really intellectual person and I think a lot. Like I'm just trying to think this anxiety away,
Yeah.
And I couldn't. You can't. You know? You're trying to fight it and you can't.
Yeah.
And
it drains you as well.
Just being able to frame things in a way that you can deal, because suddenly you go from there's not a lot of there's expectation and there's sort of judgment when you're a teenage runner, but you're like, well, I'm just a teenage runner.
Yeah.
Like, I know for me it was always the future. So I was like, well, it doesn't really matter what, I want to be good, but like at the end of the day, it's how good I am as a senior. And so, but then all of a sudden in a college environment, it's like, well, performance does matter.
Yeah.
Your performance does matter, because for me, it was my education.
Yeah.
So like my education depends on my performance, and my education is super, super important to me, because that's my ticket to, my life.
Life,
literally.
And so, so that added a whole nother level, because it's, I was a full scholarship athlete. I had to perform. And so I just didn't know how to really deal with that. My way of dealing with it was just pushing harder, which necessarily, eventually broke me. But, if I think back to it, Richard was really good. He was my sports psychologist growing up. Like before races, he was so good at like keeping me in the right mental space. And, if you look back at Lydiard, that's why he was great at. Like Lydiard was a master at psychology. He was a great technical coach, but like, man, he knew his athletes and he knew what he needed to say and at the right time.
That mind management.
Yeah, exactly. And, one of the most famous stories with Lydiard is, when they were in the taxi on the way to the Rome Stadium in 1960 for the final of the 1500 and the 5000 and the 800 and the 5000, and Lydiard turns to Hellberg and tells him that Snell's going to be an Olympic champion before him. And that wasn't for Hellberg, that was for Snell. But it's just things like that. Like, if you look at Dick Taylor's story leading into 1974, like anyone looking at that on paper would have said the guy had no right to win that title. But he ran a 1 minute PB, but he had so much belief in what he was doing, and the people that he was around, and Lydia kind of installed that. So I think it was probably a little bit more. It was more the the particular coaches and stuff that were providing that rather than professionals. But certainly I could have done with a bit of sports psychology. But,
Might have changed things slightly.
yeah. So so I ended up failing. Oh, not failing, but I didn't perform that well at that NCAA cross country. It was just completely over my head, but I think now had I not gone through that and then tried to figure out why I didn't perform well there, I wouldn't have been in that hotel room before Doha.
Yeah.
In that moment, I knew how to perform in that environment.
Yeah.
It's got to break you before you can
Yeah,
put yourself back together.
it was a
again.
very tough learning curve, and it's not necessarily something I would want my sons to go through, but it did make me, and that, and then my viewpoint on it now has changed because I did probably feel a bit, sort of a victim of it initially, and then coming from 10 years, 15 years later, it's like, well, actually, no, I needed that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to touch on it a bit later, but you're one of the most resilient human beings.
Yeah.
And I mean that as a mate that I've ever met. And so it's like, and we've been doing battle for a while. We've got similar PBs all the way to the marathon. You've got me there. But like the resiliency to have the setbacks that you've had and then to come there and, we were in Palmerston North when you ran in Doha and you've got 7 boys sitting in a pub at 11:30 a.m. We've asked them to open.
Yeah.
And we're like, you're opening and you're putting on Sky Sport 2 because fucking Caden Shields from Dunedin is about to line up in Doha, and we were pumped. But we'll get down to that. So I'm going to just slide us along ever so slightly, Tommy, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you obviously finished some study and became a physiotherapist. My first interaction with you was a spoon to my plantar after a fuck Canton. It fixed it, but
I've changed my treatment methodology since then.
But
again, we all grow.
Yeah, I mean it worked. I think that was my first interaction with you once you come back from the States. But the impressive thing about that is you've raced. I think that might have been the day we're both on the podium.
In the 5K.
In the 5K.
It's kind of funny.
It's, and then we both got outkicked by Macca, which he had every right. We're 2 10K guys. And he's a miler. And then you're going to work straight away because you had to make some coin as the physiotherapist on site at a national championships or something like that. I don't remember the story. But one of the people that I got in touch with was our mate, James Parrott. And so before we touch on sort of the physio career, he said... Caden's a great mate, first and foremost, and a real asset to the Christchurch community. As a physio, he's helped guide me through various injuries and always shares advice with no agenda. He genuinely wants to see people happy and healthy. His ability to balance his pursuits in both his professional life and high level of running alongside supporting a young family is really impressive and a testament to his unassuming work ethic. I think that's pretty fair.
Sums it up pretty well.
How do you feel about that?
I need him to write my CV.
He writes quite well, doesn't he?
He does write well.
So I guess a question I've got is, I mean, from a point of view, I kind of understand it, but how do you juggle the full-time work, the full-time training, and still turn up for now your 2 boys?
Yeah, I mean, it's something I think is a constant like push and pull. Like I don't know how to answer that question 100%, but I suppose that's how do I do it? I've got an extremely supportive wife.
That's a good start.
Who realizes the importance of running for my general well-being. So last year I was grappling with like, do I continue competing? I've been grappling with it for a while. And my sort of disappointment in Seville and subsequent like period of time where I was quite unwell, unknowingly, was a good time for reflection, where, I couldn't actually do a lot of running at that time because I was feeling pretty fatigued, and I think, 20-minute run to work was like the most I could manage at one point, 20 or 30-minute run to work.
Yeah.
But it also made me realize how important that was. So like running to work, if I can do that every day, that's great. Like that's enough. So at the moment, like competition is a bonus. Like it's, I get to compete. That's not something that I'll continue forever. And particularly at this level, but like every race is a bonus now. So beyond having children, like there's any moment now, like if something happened to them or, I needed to be there at home because one of them was unwell or something, like running would go, competition would go. I'd run to work because we got one car. But running to work's like important in terms of my mental space. So, I run to work. Often my mate Aristus joins me, which is great. We have a chat. He's always outside my gate at 6:20. He's very reliable. And
Cultural thing for us. The cultural thing is there.
And, I get to work and I have my shower and have my coffee and like I'm ready. And I'm ready to give because at work I'm giving. But I've got to do that a little bit for me on the way. And then it's the same home. So like I get change, I'm finish what I'm doing at work, make sure everything's tidy. Well, not everything's tidied up, but things that are important are tidied up. And then I put my shoes on and then I leave. And it might be 10 minutes home or it might be half an hour home. But like depending on what's happening at home and how much time I have. But that process, I need to make sure that when I enter the door at home, whatever trouble's been troubling me is like left there. It might still carry a little bit, but that's when the children and family are important. So I think for me it creates a space between things. And then I need to be well to be a good dad. So I need to be mentally well. I need to be physically well. So running provides that. And for my job as well. So for the last year was a real big reflection because it was like, well, that's what running provides me. Yes, being competitive and running fast times is cool, but it's not as cool as being healthy and being mentally well and physically well. And the decisions I've made in the last year around my running have been, is this going to have a negative impact on my health? And if the answer is yes, then I won't do it. Yeah. And I think that's the thing with competition. You've got to be careful. After running to 11, I was like, oh, maybe I can run under 2:10 and make the world's team. Should I have another crack? But after the adrenaline wore off, I was like, actually, that's not the best thing for my health. So
it's interesting you say that because one thing I've really noticed Matt say, probably in the last 2 years, is when we're chatting, he might say, are you doing that for the right reason? And he won't, that will be the comment. He won't impose his thought or you just say, you're doing that for the right reason and let me sit on it. And is that kind of where you, like, am I doing this for, and then question mark?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, like obviously competing is for me. Well, it's to try and inspire my children as well. Like I want to show them, work ethic and, I had great leadership as a young man. So that's what I want to give my boys as well, but not at the cost, not if there's a cost to that. But, and I think the other thing is like making sure that when I'm with them, and that's not always easy, but,
you try, right?
Yeah, make a big effort, I'm not distracted. Often I'm sometimes away in my own thoughts, and then just having things like, Fletcher and I go to swimming every Wednesday. So that's what we do. And he recently went upper class, which was like, with Josh the teacher, and he was not happy about it. So I realised that it's just as important for me to be in the pool as well. So we run to swimming in the pram. So, and every day the swim teacher's like, did you run to swimming today, Fletcher? And he's like, yep.
That's so cool.
So it's just things like that. And Fletcher and I often go to Joe's Garage on Cranford Street on a Saturday.
Rachel had that down.
So I think what's really interesting about what you've said there is you wanted to, I guess, inspire your kids, say, might not be running, it might be whatever, but you want them to know that, hey, even little kid from Dunedin can go all the way to Doha and then run 2:11:35. But so I had a chat to old Sammy.
Oh yeah,
had a wee chat to old Sammy, and so this is some of Sam's thoughts. It's quite long-winded, so I'm sorry. As you know, Sammy likes to yarn. And this touches on both of those things. So it says, being an outstanding physiotherapist, Kaden is a huge resource to our training squad. On any injuries, are referred to him immediately. The rehab process is entirely in his hands, which takes a huge burden off me so once the athlete is passed back to me, I know that he or she is good to go, but always mindful that the athlete needs to be continually monitored. The other plus is his running knowledge, which is infinite, being passed on to the squad as they look up to him as a bit of a father figure. Kaden and I often knock things around to ensure that we are heading in the right direction, and in other words, a huge resource for me as well. Everything Kaden says is delivered with a lot of thought, so very well based. He's a diamond for all of us. I guess when it comes to his achievement, his ability to run so close to threshold, he amazed me, to be honest. I think his last 3 marathons, he has gone through 21.1k at or close to his PB, which is quite remarkable. Plus, the older he gets, the better he gets. A great example to young athletes about the commitment and dedication on his running journey. I mean, I think that sums up.
Yeah.
Like you wanna do this thing so you can inspire your immediate, kids and be healthy and well for yourself. But then also, I don't think we can take for granted, Tom and I, Fizz, you run the time we get to work the next morning, it's the first thing we talk about. So I think you and I don't know if you do, and I'm not telling you how to feel, but definitely don't take for granted the impact you have on particularly those younger guys in Sammy's group. Listening to that, how does that make you feel?
Yeah, Sam's actually tells me those things pretty regularly, which is quite nice. But, I mean, my relationship with Sam's really special, and I'm really grateful that we've had this time together, and I hope we get more. And Sam's, he's just so reliable, and he's such a wealth of knowledge as well. And I really enjoy his company, and we text each other like nearly every day.
He loves it. He loves it. Cool.
But, not quite every day, but maybe every second day. But he's a great guy.
And I think that perfectly sums up what you mean to particularly, I guess, the immediate community that we have here in Canterbury. So let's talk through some of your sort of successes and achievements, and maybe tell a little story about each one. So Tommy, do you want to roll through that list?
Yeah, so I guess, I mean, we've already touched on it slightly, but Doha obviously being one of the pinnacles, your first international black singlet?
My only, yeah.
Yeah, first and only. Talk us through the process of that and how that came about and what the experience was like, and if there was anything you do better or like differently, or how did it all pan out for you?
Yeah, I think I performed quite poorly. Hey, again. There's a theme.
Poor performance.
It's a yo-yo.
Yeah, literally. Brief success.
The year before it, so Rachel and I were living in Melbourne in 2018. We thought it was a good idea.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a great place for us, and Rachel was really struggling at the time when we were living there, and I was working quite late, so often I think 2 nights a week or 3 nights a week I was working till 8:30. So I'd start at like 12:30.
Yeah.
And then work till 8:30, and I was a 4th year physio at the time, so you don't have a lot of bargaining power.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get home till like 9:30, and so Rachel was just on her own in the flat to from like sort of 5:30 to 9:30, and she was just really struggling with isolation, and then I'd run a few PBs since I've been there, like the Vic Milers.
Yeah.
Is amazing, and I'd run 1500 PB. Just should have broken 4 that night. Ran 4 flat, dead flat. And then I'd run a 5k PB there as well, which was 8 years actually in between PBs.
Yeah.
And that was at a Melbourne uni. 5k was awesome. And I'd run a couple of one cross country race, but I was working Saturdays as well. It's terrible hours. I was working 3 out of 4 Saturdays. Yeah. And then so I was going to do Gold Coast half, and like training. I'd run the 10k in Launceston the second time. It's a cool race. And I'd run 30:01.
Yeah,
I was really close to breaking 30 that day. But and then I thought I was going to go pretty well at the Gold Coast half, and Plone had flown over from Auckland, but I'd had a really bad week at work, and I couldn't cope with it again. Yeah. Like I was just really struggling with it, and I I got to Gold Coast and I was just in a bit of a state. And Rachel flew in a bit later, and we were staying in this apartment with my mate Dane. And I was just again struggling to sleep, and I was standing on the start line of the race, and we got underway, and then at 5K I was like, I'm still with the lead group. I was like, what am I doing here? I was like, this is Liam Adams. This is Collis Birmingham. Like, what am I doing? I was like, this is ridiculous. We just run a 2:57. Like, I shouldn't be doing this. And I just pulled back. And it was just, like, my own insecurities, like, that I didn't deserve to be there. And I shouldn't be running with these guys. And I ended up running 66 something and, like, hugely disappointed after the race. Like, I knew within myself that I'd let that one go just out of not being courageous, And so that's just bugged me. And we obviously decided to move to Christchurch, which was one of the best decisions we've ever made as a couple. Like, it's, I love this place. But, I texted Oscar as soon as I got the job. Got the job as sportsman. I was like, I'm coming.
We on.
And then I went back for Zetapec. And again, I was in good shape. Like, I was training really well. And I was like, PB, I should PB.
Yeah.
And again, the same thing happened. Like, I'm running with the front pack. And I think we went through 5K and 14:40 or something. And I just started to get under, I was under the pump a little bit.
Yeah.
And I didn't manage that situation very well, and ended up sitting behind Ed Goddard for a little bit.
Yeah.
And I was like, Ed's a good runner. Like, he'll carry me through.
Yeah.
But he didn't. Like, he was running quite slow, and I lost, like, quite a lot of time, and then realised with 2K to go that I'd, like, been asleep.
Let it slip away.
I ran the last, I might have been the last 3K, I ran a 9 flat.
Yeah.
And ran 30:01 again. I was just like, something's not right here.
Yeah.
And actually, I've been watching the Chasing Great on Rishi McCaw's film on Air New Zealand flight over and saw this, the Kerry Evans interview, and I was like, I've got to contact this guy. I'm not, like, this has been with me for too long. Like, big races, I'm not performing, and I can't blame training. Like, I'm running really well in training. Yeah. And so I actually caught up with him in the following January, and he was just, like, brutally honest with me. He's like, your mindset in races is, like, it's not a winner's mindset. Like, you're not taking risks. Like, you're comparing yourself to other runners, and is getting on top of you, and it's just crushing you. And so that was just the honesty that was needed, and so that's when I started working on it. And so Athletics New Zealand released the policy for Plone and I decided at that point that I was going to do a marathon the next year, and Athletics New Zealand released the policy for World Champs, and it was 2:16. I was like, oh, this is actually achievable. Yeah. And it was the first time that they'd gone in line with the World Athletics policy standard. Yeah. Because previous to that, I think the Rio standard was like 2:19 or something for the Olympic standard, and then obviously in New Zealand I think had 2:13 or something at the time. Yeah. And then they decided to go with the standard, and I think it was because they wanted to try and get some runners to Tokyo, and and they also wanted to use Doha as a bit of a way to experiment with the heat. Yeah. And so, because Tokyo was obviously was hot. Yeah. And so I was like, oh, this is an opportunity. And so I said to Palone, I was like, yeah, let's go for it. So we targeted Gold Coast, like, good place to go. Yeah. Minimal time difference, minimal travel, familiar location. And I was like, this time I'd never run well, apart from that 65:47 I ran with you that time. Yeah. I'd never run well there. It was the only time I'd run well. So I was like, I got to run well this time. And so I did a lot of work with Kerry that year, and then really trained well. And it was interesting. I was looking back because I still keep paper diaries, training diaries, and I was looking back at my training diary from that year, and I was like, we did a really good build up that year. Like, everything was quite good. I'd run a couple of half marathons, and the training had been good, no interruptions. Come off a pretty good solid track season. I'd won the New Zealand 10K title, and and then my attitude, 12 months later was completely different than the year before, and my mindset going in was like, I don't care if I run 2:20 or slower. Like, I'm going to try and run under 2:16. Yeah. Like, I've just got to give it a go. Like, this might be my only opportunity that I can make a New Zealand team. And so the pacing was actually a bit slow I think the group ahead was 2:10, and then the group I was with, I think they were aiming for like bang on 2:16, and I was like, oh, it's a bit close. And then the weather was terrible, like it was super windy. But anyway, we had a really good group, and Benson Lawrence was in the group.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'd sort of talk to Kerry about was like, I need to be assertive, so I can't like go into my shell because, you know, I'm a bit of a freezer, and you know, I can really freeze under pressure. And so I was like, I need to be assertive. And so one thing you know, because everyone was kind of like, oh, you know, maybe you shouldn't aim for something that quick in your first marathon. And Kerry was like, well, you know, go into this. What's the mindset that an experienced marathon runner would have in this race? He's like, how would in one of the sessions I was with him, he's like, because I said to him, I'm a bit worried about the drink stations and stuff. And he's like, well, what would an experienced marathon runner do?
Yeah.
He's like, just think about that. And so we sat there and we talked about it, and I was like, oh, true. Well, an experienced marathon runner, when they're coming up to the drink stations, they might organise the guys around them. So they sort of say, oh, you know, what's your bottle station? I'll go first, or I'll go second.
Yeah.
And he's like, and you know, if people aren't getting out of your way, you need to be assertive. But you sort of be like, you know, I'm on table number 2.
Yeah.
My bottle's coming up. Can you please get out of the way? And then, you know, if they don't move, we'll be like, I'm going to, you know, my bottle's at table 2. If you don't get out of the way, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
And so it was just being a bit more assertive. And so that's sort of the attitude I went in with. And I was like, I've just got to nail that. So I nailed that. And, you know, for the first 10K went really well. And we got to the turnaround at Burley Heads. And that's when I just started realising that I was in control. Like a few of the guys around me were just starting to panic a bit around the drink stations and stuff. And at that point I was feeling like, mentally I'm in a good spot here. And then we got to about 17K and Benson Lawrence just started running off the front. And one of the older guys, Andy Buchanan's coach, Scott Westcott, was running, and he was like, oh, guys, he's running a bit quick. Like, we need to let him go. And I just turned to Ben and I was like, how fast are you going, man? And he's like, well, I'm going to pick it up, but I'm not going to like go berserk. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'll come with you. That's awesome. And it was just, Kerry had said to me, there'll be a moment in the race where you're going to have to make a decision. Yeah. And you're going to have to take a risk. And like, if you don't take that risk,
it's funny how that plays out.
It's and I think we should focus on that because it is so true. Yeah. I think in every good race all three of us have ever had, you have a heads or tails. Yeah. You're like, am I all the way in or am I all the way out? Yeah. And you can't regret it. Like kind of either way, but I have found that when you bitch out, you regret it. Yeah. But if you go in and it doesn't work, you don't regret it. Yeah. Because you go, I gave it a go.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing we'd spoken about. Like, Kerry said to me, well, I'd said to him, I was like, I'm really worried that I've put so much effort in my whole career and I'll never represent New Zealand when it was my biggest goal. And he was like, so what? What makes you special? Like, there's plenty of kids who dream of being professional footballers who never make it. Like, why do you think that, you know, you're the only one, you know? Like, well, not the only one, but like, it's not any different for you. And it was just like good honesty. I was like, sweet. Fair enough. and I just had to be okay with never ever representing New Zealand to take that risk. Yeah. Because I think if I was so scared of failing, I wouldn't have taken that risk. Yeah. Because that was Benson Lawrence. So, I mean, the guy was like running 27:10 for 10K when I was in college. Like he was
an Australian record holder. Yeah.
And here I am like, yeah, bro.
I'll go with you.
So anyway, I was stuck on the back of him, and we were running like, I thought my GPS was, because I had a Sunto at the time, and I thought my GPS was off, and we were running 302 or something like that. But we had a big tailwind, but I was like, oh, GPS must be off. Yeah.
That's a good trick in your head.
I was just hanging on to him, and we had another Japanese guy with us, and at one point he's like, Kaden, do you think you can take the lead? I was like, nah, mate. I'm on my rivet. And I got to 25K, and I was like pretty gassed. I was like struggling to see.
That's the hard point of the marathon, in that Gold Coast Marathon too. Yeah.
You come back into surfers. Yeah. And I remember getting my bottle, and and then I like just had to like let them go. But like a few K down the road, here's Yuki Kawauchi coming back to me, and I joked with the boys in the build up. I was like, oh, it'd be funny if I beat Yuki Kawauchi. Like, how classic would that be? Like just jokingly, not like actually thinking there'd be any chance. And here he comes crawling back to me at about 30K, and I just couldn't believe it. I was like, debut marathon. I've just run with Benson Lawrence. Now I'm running with now I'm running with Yuki, and Yuki was great. Like we ran together for the whole rest of the race, and we got to the 37K mark and the turnaround, and we were back into the headwind, and I was hurting real bad, and I'm running into this headwind, and Yuki Kawauchi's sitting on me.
Yeah.
And I just watched this guy win the Boston Marathon in the worst conditions
Yeah.
ever, like a year earlier. And I'm like, this guy's sitting on me. And I turned to him, I was like, Yuki, take the lead.
Do something.
That's awesome.
And he was like, okay. And he took the lead for a while, and then I took it back, and then he kicked me. But like, it was just, and then I was with 200 to go. A lot of thoughts were going through my head in the last 2K, and I was like, can't wait to get across the line and see Rachel. And then I was like, thinking about like my wasn't thinking too much about how fast I was running. Dan Jones actually wasn't that far behind me, and I'd seen him at the turnaround, and I was like, in my mind, I was just staying calm. I was like, oh, well, if he passes me, like, he's run amazing, and, good on him. Like, he's done a really good job, and that was just keeping me in control. And then I got to, 200 to go when you come through, and there's a clock, 200 to go, and I could see I was going to run under 2:16. I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I just, like, enjoyed that last straight. I was just,
Yeah.
I still got that photo on my wall, and everyone's like, you should change it to 2:11. I'm like, no race will ever be like that.
Yeah.
That when your childhood dream comes true, and like Steve Willis had said to me before the race, he's like, if you run the time, you'll go. I'm pretty, he's like, we'll take you.
Yeah.
So I crossed that line in 2:15:36, and I was just like, oh my
Done
God.
it.
Yeah.
There's another good little nugget of good stuff in there that I'll touch on, and you're so right. When you run free of persecution or pressure, you probably run better.
Yeah, and I think it's being able to run free in the presence of pressure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you
That's a
just
skill, yeah.
you just go. I mean, I experienced that with Julian a couple of weeks ago in the 10,000 meters on the track, and you go, I'm going to catch him. I caught him. If he comes past me, well done.
Yeah.
But I'm going to continue my effort. I'm not going to worry about what I can't control. Like
Exactly, yeah.
And I think in a marathon, that is an unbelievably powerful thing because shit happens.
Yeah.
Like multiple times, shit happens, and every now and again you get one, and we'll talk about it soon. Where probably more things go right than there's more good things than shit.
Yeah.
But I think it's a really powerful thing to.
Yeah, that was a big thing for me because I used to worry a lot about things I couldn't control, and it was being able to differentiate and really just focus on what I had control over.
Yeah.
That was a big difference really in the performance and big events.
So you go from thinking you might hang the towel up.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go from thinking, well, be nice to run with the boys once a week, or run to work to and from, to getting yourself in a place healthy, enjoying it. And I think one thing you've mentioned in some circumstances, not in others, is the word fun. And you sort of start talking about stuff that seemed fun, and your eyes go bright and the smile comes on for those people that aren't watching on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you kind of get yourself into shape and you think, okay, maybe I might have another go. What goes into the thought process of picking the marathon that you just ran?
No, be okay. So I contacted. So Plon and I stopped working together around August 23, and I self-coached with help of Don and Sam for a while. I was sort of sending them training, and they were reviewing it. And then I targeted Seville. And the main reason I targeted Seville was like, this could be my last marathon, so I'm just going to go to one of the fastest courses in the world and see what I can do. And like,
Seems reasonable.
Yeah. And I'd sort of had a really good build up and training had gone pretty well. I did 25k out at Taitap in 3:06s, and I was like, I was pretty tired at the end of it, but I was like, 2:11's possible. And Don was like, yeah, I think Don doesn't mince his words, and like would never overinflate your ego.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, I think you can probably run 2:10, 2:11. Like, I think it's in the wheelhouse. And so I got to Seville, and the whole week, I got there on the Sunday, and then you have your normal travel fatigue. And then the Tuesday or the Wednesday, I did 3 by a K. And I did them on a marked K in the park in Seville. And I was just like struggling, and I just felt terrible. I was like, okay, this, like, maybe it's just the travel. Like,
Yeah.
it's nothing major. And, being a naive Kiwi, I was drinking the tap water. I'd always drunk in the tap water in Europe, eh? Like, even in like Cyprus, when we were on training camp with Athletics New Zealand, we were all drinking tap water, I think. And then when I've been to Germany, same thing. So I don't know, I was a bit guilty about buying bottled water, and it's just not in your nature really as a Kiwi to like buy bottled water all the time. Even when I was in the States, I drank tap water. And I'd Googled it. I was like, is Seville tap water safe? And I was like, yeah.
Dr. Google.
Yeah, I do the same thing.
And turns out that had a 6-fold increase in cryptosporidium that summer.
Yeah.
And I didn't know this at the time. And it must have either been in the drinking water or like there was a pool in the apartment when I was staying. I didn't swim in it, but like it could have been in the pool as well. Because I was like putting my legs in. It was nice. It was like a balcony pool. I was like sitting out in the sun. I had my feet in it and stuff, probably my hands in it. So like he could have easily have ingested some of the water. So I don't know. I'll never know. But I just felt terrible the whole week. And, again, like I wasn't letting it get in the way of my mental state and got on the start line and raced and felt fine for the first half, really. And then at 30K, like I just lost all my power. And I felt in control, like compared to like when I'd run Hamburg, like at 30K in Hamburg when I'd run 213, I was like seeing stars at 30K. Like I just got through the last 12. But it was really weird in Seville. I just like lost my power. It was weird. And I crossed the finish line and immediately vomited, which has never happened to me after a race. And then my guts were just really, really upset. And I was sitting on the bus beside Phil Sessman on the way back to the athlete hotel. And like, I was in a world of hurt and got back to the hotel and I was just on and off the toilet the whole afternoon. I was meant to meet up with my friend Nick Brown from Dunedin days for a coffee, and I was texting. I was like, mate, I can't leave the hotel room. Like, I'm really quite unwell. And initially, I just thought it was a race. Like you run a hard marathon, your guts are sometimes a bit upset. And by the evening, I was a bit better, and I got ordered the most expensive McDonald's in the world. And then Uber Eats McDonald's are so underwhelming. Like, and
you think it's going to be unreal.
Yeah. But it was the only thing I felt like eating, and then finally, the next day I was pretty good. So I just, felt like it was just due to the race. And Don was like, you sure you weren't sick? We were talking. And because of the time zone differences, I had to wait like all day to talk to somebody. I was like lying on my bed like,
It's the hardest part, eh?
it's so sad. And feeling pretty sorry for myself. And then called Don and he's like, what happened? Because again, Don's straight up, like he doesn't sugarcoat anything. He's like, what happened? And I was like, oh, that's all I had, Don. And he's like, okay, you sure you weren't sick or something? I was like, nah, that's all I had, man. Like, I'm sorry, but like maybe 213's all I've got. And so anyway, I came home back to New Zealand and just, back to normal life. And, I had the normal fatigue and I was just like, oh, I'm just tired from the marathon, like big training block. It normally takes 6 weeks to come right.
Yeah.
And then, I got back to a bit of training and did some good sessions and stuff. But, I was just feeling pretty average in training in general and it was like low energy and low motivation, and which is quite unusual. And so I was like, maybe I'm done with this. Like, maybe I don't have the drive anymore. And, and then I got really sick again at Christchurch Marathon weekend. Like, I was meant to be getting involved in the marathon. And then, like, as the days got closer, it was like Rachel she was pregnant at the time and she'd been a bit unwell that week. And I know we must have caught a bug somewhere or something, and I caught it later in the week, and and then, I was just feeling terrible the morning of the race, and I went down and paced Sabina, my friend, for the first 10K, and my tummy was like really sore, so I just walked home really slowly, and then
It's crazy.
I was really sick that night. Like Fletcher thought it was hilarious. I was like vomiting, and he was like, "Do it again, Daddy."
Bro, kids are ruthless, man.
I know.
The last thing
They
you
will
want.
bring you, but you're like, I just ran 213. No vomit.
Yeah.
And so that took me a few days to come right. Took a few days off work and stuff and then went back. And then again, like I just couldn't get my energy levels back and I was having a lot of stomach pain and stuff. So Rachel was like, you gotta go to the doctor. So I called the GP and they were like, where have you been? And I was like, Spain. And they're like, oh, okay, you've got a parasite. So they did some tests and it was confirmed. But so that was kind of nice to know there was something that had been wrong that I wasn't aware of. And
Yeah.
I'd lost a lot of weight as well. I was like down to like 61 kgs or something. 62 maybe. And I was like, man, I've lost like 4 kg.
Yeah.
And I haven't been running. And then, it was getting... So initially the goal was like, I just got to get back running again. So you can't really treat it. It was just time. So it took me 4 months to recover from it. And then at the time I was like, I kind of just need someone to write me a program. Like I don't really want to think about what I'm doing for running. And I was out running with James Parra and I was like, what do you reckon? Like, do you think a UK coach or like, I just want someone out of New Zealand, like just want a different perspective on things. And he was like, oh, have you thought about Moose, Julian Spence, who I raced against in Doha, and Julian and I got on really well. Like, talk about shoes. He owns a shoe store as well. And I remember in Gold Coast in 2019 talking to him about the relationship you and I had, Oscar. And he thought that was really cool. And we spent a bit of time together in Doha. And after the race in Doha, like he was really complimentary of my performance. He came across the line. And he was like, "Oh man, you're a badass" or something. Like, and so we'd sort of, I wouldn't say kept in touch, but like kept tabs on one another. And then, and I was like, oh, that's a good idea. Because I've been coaching Ellie Pashley and she'd been running really well. And like, I really like Moose again. He's not a sugarcoater. Like he's real honest and straight up. And so I gave him a text. I was like, hey man, like I'm just looking to a bit of a program. I don't know if I'll run another marathon or not, but like I'm doing my master's in physio now and running's kind of taking a back seat, and Rachel's pregnant again. And, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do much when we have 2 kids. And I was like, but I just want someone to like give me something to do. I don't want to have to think about it. He was like, yeah, man, sure. But he's like, just keep in mind, like, you can still run better. And he's like, you've got more in you, man. He's like, mate, we can get more out of you. And I was like, you think? And he was like, yeah. And so straight away, like, this is the first phone call we had. And I was like, oh man, this guy actually believes in me. And so he's like, just keep it in mind. And so we got back into some training, and I started off just managing myself. And then I got COVID as well. And like, I was getting sick every month. It was,
Oh, you were no good.
Yeah.
We were running around the park and you were just no good.
Yeah. My immunity was shot. But finally, like, COVID actually, I felt better after it was funny. I like, probably because I rested. We were in a hotel.
That's lesson number 3.
Yeah. we were in a hotel in Dunedin. We were meant to be there for the King's birthday weekend, and I got COVID on that weekend. And so I was locked up in this hotel in Dunedin, isolating. And I just ate like heaps of food and rested, and Rachel went out and did stuff with Fletcher, and I got heaps of recovery, and I was able to get back into a bit of training once the COVID had passed, and I started feeling a bit better again, and just built back into some training. And I always liked to, I started doing some like 200 meter reps, so I do like 5 200 meter reps at the 36, and I remember that was hard.
Yeah.
And then I started progressing into 400 meter reps, and some days I was struggling to run quicker than like 75. But I just take my time, just work my way back. And eventually I got back to doing like 20-minute tempos, and I texted Moose and I was like, mate, I just did a 20-minute tempo on like 320, so I'm back. And he's like, all right, mate, well, this is what he started coaching me and giving me sessions to do. And it's much like the relationship I had with Palone. It was like he just gave me sessions to do during the week, and I sort of managed everything else. And I was doing these rep sessions on a Tuesday, which I just started doing. I was a bit bored of 2-hour runs. I'm a bit bored of that. Like I'm sick of going for a 2-hour run. So I was like, I'm just going to work on my speed. So I was like, I'll just do some 200 reps, and I'll run them at like 35, 36. And then I got to a point where I was doing like 15 of them, and I was like, all right, I might progress it to 400 meter reps. And I do a mix. I do like maybe 8 400 meter reps, and then I'd do like another 10 200 meter reps, all at like, 35, 36, 72. It was just short recoveries. And then Moose would give me like a bit of threshold work to do on a Thursday, bit of sub-threshold. And I eventually built that Tuesday session up to like, maximum I did was about 7K of work. And it was fun. I was like, running fast is fun. This is way more fun than jogging. And I was enjoying it. And like, I don't know, it was just like going back to basics. It was like, how can I get faster at running? Maybe running faster more regularly.
Yeah.
So I was doing that, and I was having fun. And then most started giving me like slightly harder sessions, and some of the sessions I was like, oh, don't know if I can do that. And then I'd do it, and I'd be like, oh, okay, that's cool. And it was like he was just giving me stuff that I'd not done before, like 6 by 6 minutes. We'd start about sub-threshold, work up to threshold, and I was starting to run some of these last reps in under 6 minutes, and not going above threshold. And I was like, oh. I remember James saw me in the park one day. I was like, mate, I'm running better than before Seville. And it just kind of came about without really forcing it. And the other thing I decided, I was like, I've been doing 3-hour runs for years, and I was sick of them. I'd done so many gibbies loops.
Yeah.
I was just over it. And I was like, I'm just done with it. Like, I'm sick of dodging cars. I was like, I'm just going to run up Mount Pleasant. Like, there's not many cars. I'm going to run along the Summit Road. I'm just going to drop down Rapik, and I'm going to run home. And it's going to be like 2.5 hours. And I'm just going to be okay with it. Because I used to get quite worked up if I didn't do like 3 hours. But I was just getting a bit over that. And so the other thing I decided was like, I just might try and run those a little bit quicker. So I just started doing that. And yeah, the fitness was just coming along. And it was just out of pure enjoyment, really. And then I started going really well. And I was running better threshold sessions than ever. And I was like, I need to race.
Yeah. I'm in shape.
Yeah. And then Vinny, I was hoping to do the 10K down in Timaru because I was like, I might actually run a PB here. And then Vinny was late to the party. He's a very chill baby, so he wasn't in a rush. And he came a couple of weeks late. So Timaru got binned, and then I was like, in my mind, I was like, there is a half marathon in Auckland next week. I've got to somehow convince Rachel it's a good idea for me to go.
Bro, you're a brave man. I looked at you on the entry list and I was like, my guy. you are walking on a knife.
So I was like, Rach, I know you've just given birth, but
can your sister come stay?
I called Mum. I was like, do you think you can come stay? But I was just so fit and like ready to go. And I was like, I just want to see what I can do. Like, I know I'm training well, but that doesn't always mean you're going to run better in a race. And so I contacted Auckland and I was like, can you get me in the race? And they're like, yep. And Macca McLaren works for Air New Zealand, so he sorted me some flights. And I got up there. Tom, my physio, everyone helped out. Tom, my physio colleague at work, Tom Williams, he's a very reliable man. He got my race bib for me, met me in my hotel with my race bib, got there at like 6 o'clock the night before the race, got some dinner, got to sleep, wake up at 3 a.m. Got the ferry across, ate my Weet-Bix in Devonport. And then I was like, this race, I'm just going to go for it from the gun. Like, Julian was in the race, and mind you, had just got married and been on a honeymoon. And but I was like, he's here, and he's dominated the domestic scene for years. Like, he's a great runner. Like, if he's in the race, you got to give the man full respect. So I'm like, I'm going to show him full respect by going out as hard as I can.
The first hill. Go.
Yeah, so I went for it, and soon enough I was on my own, and I was like, oh, okay, sweet. And then they caught me on the hills, and then I ran away again. And then it was so windy, I got, as you all know, got caught at Auckland Harbour Bridge again, like on the motorway. And then one of my thoughts was like, I want to run the last 5K in under 15 minutes. So I got to the top of the bridge and took off, and ran the last 5K in like 14:59, I think. And I texted Moose and I was like, that was good. Like, the time doesn't reflect it, but like, that was a good run. It's probably the best half marathon I've run. And I was like, we've got to target a marathon. So Brett Lana and I have been in contact for years. We met in 2019 again at Gold Coast, and he's a super nice guy and very helpful and always had time for me. And we just kept in contact, and even after I ran 2:13 in Hamburg, like, we hadn't been in contact for a little while, and he like just emailed me out of the blue. He's like, oh, Kaden, I saw you ran 2:13 in Hamburg, like, well done, that's great. And so I would always just kind of ask him for advice. Like, if I was looking for a race to do, I'd sort of be like, what do you think? Just fire him off an email, and he'd sort of give me all these like races that he thought would be good to do. And I'd normally worked with Derek Frood, and Derek was amazing as well. Like, you know, these guys aren't making any money out of me, but, you know, Derek was always so giving with his time. And then I decided to do something in Asia because I was like, I need something that's not as much travel time. And I can sort of get in, get out, and be home in a reasonable, you know, period, so I'm not leaving my family for too long. But the problem with the Asian races is, you know, most of them are going out so fast. And I learned that lesson in Osaka where, you know, I rocked up to Osaka hoping for a similar experience to Hamburg, and it was completely different. You know, like, if you're not prepared to go out in 63, you're pretty much running on your own. And
It's crazy.
Kamikazes.
Yeah.
Crazy.
And so that's what happened in Osaka, and I was deeply disappointed after that race because I was like, man, it was just a race selection issue. Like, I was fit. Again, it was another scenario where I think I could have run close to 2:11, but like, I just got the wrong race. And so I'd learned a lot from that race, and And so I emailed Brett and I was like, is there a race in Asia that's going to go at 2:10? And he was like, yep, Nobioka. And I couldn't even find it online. Like I couldn't even find the
Try
website.
spelling it.
Yeah. And he sent me the results from last year and I looked at them. I was like, man, there's like 20 guys going through halfway bang on 65. I was like, this is perfect. I was like, I was like, because, my relationship with been with Derek, Brett never wanted to stand on Derek's toes. And so I was like, no, you go through Derek. So I asked Derek and Derek's like, oh, sorry, man, I don't think I can get you into that. He's like, you could contact the race director yourself. But I just said to Brett, Derek can't get me in. Is there any chance you can? And he just entered me in the race like a normal person and put my addresses, like his address in Tokyo. And so I sent him some money through Wise to pay for the entry fee and an agent fee. And I was like, all right, I'm in. So yeah, booked flights and stuff, and then rocked up there, and I'd watched the race video from the year before, and I was like, this looks perfect. Like it's quite an undulating course. Like it had my GPS said it had 200 meters of elevation gain, so it was pretty up and down a lot of the way, like minor hills, but they were wet up, I suppose. And but I was like if I've got a group, it's like negates that. And so initially, Brett texted me like a week before the race or 10 days before the race. He's like, mate, they're not going to give you bottles. And I was like, okay, that's fine. I was like, they're going to make it hard. That's sweet. But I'd had that similar experience in Osaka where like the Japanese don't make it easy for you.
Yeah.
So, and that's fair enough. Like you're in their neighborhood. So, so I was like, I came in and got 100 gels from Oscar. And I was prepared.
Bigger than your grocery bill.
Yeah. I was not quite, but I was prepared to run with gels, and then I got to Nobioka on the Tuesday, and I got to Tokyo on the Monday, and I can't remember what day, but Brett texted me, he's like, oh, they're going to give you bottles now, and I was like, cool. But anyway, it turns out that I wasn't in the invited field, so they didn't. My bid number was 121, so they didn't put my bottles at the front of the table; they put them at the back. So I only managed to get 2 during the race. They didn't have a 5K station, they just had 10K station. So I got the bottle at 10 and then missed 15, missed 20, got 25, just like I thank all my years of bull sports for that one. It was like running along and I just saw it in the corner of my eye. Managed to like get it out of the back of my hand.
Fucking
surprised you have it in your hand.
Wild, but Mum had said, like, I knew that I'd needed to be prepared. Like I'd been on the phone to Mum a couple of days before, and she's like, I was like, oh, they're going to give me bottles now. She's like, don't rely on it. She's like, make sure you put gels in your carry some extra gels. So that's what I did anyway. But I think because it was so cold, you didn't need it that much. Like it was below 0, and like your stomach's. I do think it's harder to consume in that sort of temperature. And the other thing, the sort of mindset I went into it was like, I was far more relaxed. Just trying to be a bit more fluid with things in that race. Like, I think previous marathons, like I tried to control so many things and just got a little bit worked up about things. And like Nobioka, I was like, this has to be different. Like if I'm going to run faster than 2:13, this race has to be different. So it was a different build up. It was a different week leading into it. I enjoyed Japan a bit more. Like Brett gave me a heap of restaurants, a few restaurants that I should go and visit. So I went and visited them, and they were great. Like eating out in Japan was awesome. Like being amongst the Japanese people. Like in Osaka, I just stayed in my apartment the whole time, cooking and stuff. I was trying to embrace Japan a bit more. And the area that I was in, like I learned all this history about it. Nobioka is the home of one of the best corporate running teams in Japan, Asahi Kasei, and their headquarters was just down the road from where I was staying. And the Wednesday I got there, I'd like Moose wanted me to do a session, but I was just so tired. I got in like at midnight the night before, and I'd booked a smoking room, like, and I didn't know. And they were like, "You're in." I went upstairs to my room, and it was like stunk. And I went back down to the lobby, and I was like, I'm in a room that smells like smoke. And we had to get Google Translate out. And they were like, you booked it, mate. I was like, oh. I was like, how do I get out of this? So I like put it in my Google Translate. I was like, in my country, it's illegal to smoke in hotels, and like showed it to them, and they're like, ah. So they scrambled and got me a room that wasn't a smoking room.
That's awesome.
But the Japanese are very hospitable like that. So that was good. But anyway, the next morning, it was like 4 a.m. New Zealand time when I got there. So I was like cooked. And then I woke up, of course, early because I was jet lagged, like out of time zone. So I'd only had about 6 hours sleep. And then I tried to do this session and it didn't feel right. Like I was staying along beside this river. It was beautiful. My hotel looked out right over. It was awesome. I think that's like those things for me, like being in a nice place is really important before a race. Like it just grounds me like a river or a mountain, you know?
Yeah.
But I was running up this river and it was just blowing. Like this front had come from from Korea that week, and like it was so cold and it was so windy. And I was like, I'll try and do the session. I can't remember what it was. It was like mile reps or something. And I started doing this session. I was running down this road, and I hadn't actually checked where the road went. And I like got 2 minutes into it and it went straight up a hill. And I just stopped. I was like, okay, I'm not doing this session. It's just everything's telling me not to do this session. So
you got to wake up. Be like, nah.
So I jogged back to the hotel and I called Moose. I was like, I didn't do the session. He's like, okay, sweet. He's like, just do a shorter one tomorrow. I was like, yeah, true. So anyway, I was like, I'll try and find a track. So I text Brett and I was like, Brett, is there a track around here? And he like sent me 2 tracks. He's like, there's a public track or this is a Sahi Kasai's track. And I was like, I'm going to go to Sahi Kasai. So I like went down there and it was like this 4-lane track. It was super cool. And it was open. So I was like, oh, I'll train on it. So I think I did 4 by a K at like marathon pace. It was still windy as hell, but like I was just rolling in them in 306s. And one of them I wasn't looking at the watch, I ran 302 and I was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm good. And then I did I was meant to do 5 of them, but I just chose to do 4. And then I did a couple of 200 meters at race pace and then jogged back and I was like, I've done enough. And then, yeah, just cruised the rest of the week. So, yeah, so it was a good race from like pacing point of view. Like it's so hard to find races now that are at 210. Like everything since the Olympic standard went to 208, it was just like 210 guys were forgotten about. And you know, you're not really. It's still not that fast, like internationally nowadays. So that was the cool thing about Nobioka. And unfortunately, yeah, we were a bit slower than 210 on the pacing. Not sure why. Initially, I thought it might have been because it was a bit windy that they decided to go a bit slower, but it must have been some conversations had that I wasn't privy to. But yeah, I think the whole experience, like the whole week was just cool. And you know, training at a Sahi Kasai. And then Brett was there with me from Friday onwards, and he was just awesome. We had meals barring breakfast, every meal together, and just chatting. And he introduced me to a few of the Japanese, and there was a guy who ran. He was a silver medalist at the Barcelona Olympics for Japan. He's one of the coaches of the corporate teams there now, and he was a massive influence in Brett's life, funnily enough. And Brett was telling me about that, and then he introduced me to him, and he was part of he ran for Asahi Kasai, and they used to come out and train in Canterbury. So it's just like all these things were just like during the week. I was like, man, this feels really good, you know, like this. It's just things that are non-tangibles, but the whole week I was like, oh, this
yeah, it's little brick by brick.
Yeah.
It just
like
keeps you calm and
then the race morning was really good, and like my hotel was 500 meters from the start line, and it was a very relaxed race. It was only about 400 runners, and they were like, oh, you just rock up to the start line whenever you like. Like there's no pressure. So I had my
cool
breakfast,
room, no protocol.
Listened to some Drax Project. Brett like took my bottles down for me, and then he came and grabbed me at about 7:35, and we walked down. I did a bit of a warm up, and I ran back to my hotel to use the toilet. Like, how good is that?
Yeah. That's awesome.
Whereas in Spain, like lining up with hundreds of other athletes, try and use 2 portaloos. So anyway, it was just really good. Like everything about it was great, and the race was panned out. It's the most comfortable I felt in a marathon. Like running 2:11 is the easiest marathon I've ever run. Like I got to 30K and was still like pretty good, pretty in control. Just about surged at 27K. I was like, hold up, Don's gonna rip me a new one if I push too hard too early.
Yeah.
And at 33K, the guy that won it ran and made a massive move. Like he split 252 up a hill. There's the biggest hill on the course. He'd actually said in his pre-race interview that he was going to do that.
That's ballsy.
Yeah.
He'd run really well at the New Year Kaden. Okay. So he was in great shape, and he took off and like a lot of the guys tried to go with him, and I was just like, Don always says to me, at that point in the race, like, if you feel the pace lifting and you don't think you should go with it, you probably shouldn't go with it, like. So I let them go, and I still ran a 3:03. Like, I checked my watch as it went off, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
And
more than right.
Yeah. And then I ran a couple of 3:12s. Just my bib number started coming off, and I started trying to put it back on again. And I was like, oh, don't be silly, just let it be. And I managed to run down a few of the guys. And I knew that, like, I didn't know anything apart from watching the video. I didn't know much of the course. I knew it was just out and back, so it's not too complicated. But I'd run the last 3K the week leading up, so I knew like a couple of key landmarks. There was a hill, so I was like, get around the hill. It's about 2Ks to go. And the nice thing about the last 2K actually is that you sort of climbed up over the bridge over the river that I was staying by, and then it just like the last 500 meters was like slightly downhill and then into a left turn into the finish. It's like a great way to finish.
Yeah, that is.
It's not like Hamburg, where Hamburg you have a hill at the finish. It was like just downhill into a left-hand turn. And actually at 40K, I knew I was going to run 2:11 something, and I was like, Callum Moody, 2:11:39. Like motivated me for 4 years.
Yeah.
I was like, I've got to get to Callan. And I crossed the line, and I actually just cried. I was like, I believed I could run 2:11. I don't know if many others had. Obviously, Julian did and Don did, but I think out of that circle, I'm not sure many people believed I could do that. And but I had, and so it was kind of, it's just, yeah, it was, I wouldn't say it was like joy at the finish. It was just more like relief, like,
Yeah.
I could do it. I was okay with only having run 2:13. Like, I'd accepted that might be as good as I had. That's fine. But to be able to actually get the opportunity to go and do it again.
It's quite a
Prove yourself right.
yeah,
moment.
but it's quite a. It can be quite a personal moment, right? Where you think people look at maybe some other times you've run and they go, oh, you can't do that or whatever, and you do it, and you do have that little moment with yourself, like, well done, bro.
Yeah.
You have that little like, if no one else gives a fuck, and there's plenty of people did. But it's like, well done, man.
Yeah.
Like, we did this, and you're talking to yourself. I've done that to myself when with my half marathon PB, like, oh, done, young fella. Like, go get him.
Yeah, a big part of it, I think, was just getting, like, I did need people that believed in me. I didn't need people to overinflate my ego or blow smoke up my backside. Like, that's not what I was after. I was just after to someone to, Don and Julian to be like, we believe you can do it. Like, and Don had seen me train, and Julian had raced against me, and like, again, like, Don would never say anything to you that he didn't believe, and they're both very honest people, and so when they agree, when they both believed in me, it gave me a lot of inspiration. And I actually texted Julian like 7 days before the race. I done a workout, a pretty good threshold session on the Thursday with Sam. He hadn't seen me train in a while, and he was kind of a bit surprised. And then he sort of said to me, "Oh mate, like, that's the best shape you've been in." And then on the Saturday, I did 3x3K at race pace, and like I was just like holding back, running 3:03s, and I was on tired legs, and I like turned to Don, and I was like, Don, I really believe I can do it. And then I texted Julian after the race, and I was like, I just have this deep sense of belief, like, if I can get the next week right, like, if I can just not have something go wrong, majorly wrong, like, I can get this done. So it was deep, like, it wasn't like me trying to pump myself up. It was sort of like I just felt ready. Yeah. And that was a really nice feeling going into the race. Yeah, I mean, the weeks I was still stressed as the week going into the race.
There's your personality, and then there's like how you kind of look after yourself. Yeah. So I'm also just conscious of your time too, here, mate, because we've it's been an amazing conversation. I got two questions. Oh, well, we kind of already answered one. A couple of questions here from Rach. We talked about the gut problem, and then you kind of touched on it. But what would it take for you to retire? You kind of touched on that as well with the kids, but
yeah. Well, like,
I think she's going to listen just to the end of this.
She's jumping straight to the start.
I don't think I'll never retire from running, and she knows that. Like, but every race is an opportunity now for me. Like, that's how I view it. Like, I get to do it. It's not, it's something that I can do. I get to do, and I never take that for granted. And like, I've got goals for this year already. I had goals as soon as I finished. But I am a very goal-driven person, and I've realised that that's how I operate. I always have operated that way. I've got other goals in life as well with my masters and thesis, and I'm submitting my ethics this weekend. So that's a big goal this year to get that done. And, I've got professional goals and family goals. So, if I don't get to run another marathon, that's okay. I'm happy with what I've achieved. I've had a great career. But I'll still, while I can, I'll aim for another one. And then, I still feel like I've got more left. And but yeah, to be honest, like if it wasn't able to be supported by the family, which it has to be, like it took a whole team to get me to Nobioka. Like my mum, Rachel's parents took her and the boys to Hamner for 3 nights, and they took a massive weight off my shoulders. Like, I co-sleep with Fletcher, and Rachel co-sleeps with Vinny, and Fletcher still wakes, once or twice in the night. And so, like, I knew that Rachel was going to be getting minimal sleep. So to know that she was going to be with her parents and her dad would be able to look after Fletcher at night was like a huge relief. And then my mum came and stayed for the weekend. So just knowing she had that support, like you couldn't do it without it. No. And then even like some of my Sunday long runs, I sort of dropped Fletcher at the in-laws so I could run from their house. And yeah, family's just super, super important, and their belief in me and like support, none of this would happen without them. And so, yeah, as long as I have their support, I'll continue. But if they said to me that they can't do that, then family, family will always come first. But
I think that's a really powerful position to be in, and an amazing realization, because it does just bring you at peace where you're like, well, I'm standing on the start line, I'm fit, and I'll have a go. Because it could be
your last time.
It could be the last, but not in a sense of like panic or frustration, or it's just you're like, I'm here and I'm able.
Yeah.
And so let's have a go.
Yeah. You just never know what's around the corner, man. Like, it could be something health related, like an injury, or like something happens to your kids, like your wife. Like, you just never know. Like, and I think, you really want to enjoy the moments when they're good, but you never want to take them for granted, or like ever think that that could be as good as it's going to get, and really enjoy it and be grateful for it. And yeah, because life happens, and you just I think gratefulness is a really important component in life.
For yourself, for the people around you, for the sport you're doing, all that stuff. I might attempt to land this. Yeah. Because I feel like we could probably talk for another half an hour, but it's pretty hot in here without the fan on. Well, it's been an amazing conversation. I think Tom and I
have been a passenger. It's been awesome.
Tom and I haven't had to carry the episode this week, which is unreal, but it's been an amazing conversation. I think, people listening they can see the time on a piece of paper.
They don't know the backstory.
But I would say that there's a very small percentage of humans listening that will understand the unbelievable motivation and determination and community that goes into that. If we want to say at this point, whatever happens later is different. At this point, that 2:11:35 is.
Yeah, I think the time is cool, but like at the end of the day, for me, what's most important is, the influence I have on others around me, and I want that to be positive, and like, that's what I want people to remember me for, not for half-assed around. Yeah.
And I think the comments from Sam, the comments from Jimmy, I tried to get T-Pain, but he didn't come through for me. So, I mean, I've just written here, as we've been chatting, you can see the passion in your eyes when you talk about the memories from primary school, from high school, from university, and how much those things mean to you and how they've shaped you as a human being and as a friend to Tom and I and to the community. I said it earlier, even when we were back racing in our early 20s or whatever, mid-20s, you're one of the most determined, resilient, competitive and inspiring people I know. And I really mean that. So thank you for what you've done for Tom and I, keeping us going. Yeah. And
thanks you guys for your support as well. Like, you really welcomed me into the Christchurch community when I came here, and you've had a huge influence on my life as well. So yeah, thank you.
No doubt. All right. Tommy, anything to add? No, you're good.
A marathon episode for a marathon man. That's what I'm going to leave it with.
I like that. There's the top.